Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Agenda on TV3. My name is Deborah Kwabla. 60 years after independence, Ghana depends on a lot of aid for her developmental priorities. For a country that is known for resources, some have suggested that this dependence on aid is unwarranted. And we know the president has been talking about Ghana beyond aid. Is Ghana beyond aid a reality? With me in the studio this afternoon to look at this discussion from far left, we have Professor Godfred A. Bokpin. He's a head department for finance, University of Ghana. In the middle, we have Professor Cletus Dodonu. He's an economist and public policy analyst, CEO and chairman of Cledot Consult. On my immediate left, we have Mr. Tony Dogbe. He's a co-chair from the Citizens Movement Against Corruption. He's also principal consultant for Participatory Development Associates. Welcome, gentlemen, to Agenda. The president has been explaining his concept of Ghana beyond aid. Let's listen, and we'll come back and go to the discussion. Yeah, welcome back. We apologize for that. We'll come back and take the president's explanation of Ghana beyond aid. But my guests are here. We'll start with you, Doc, Professor Bokpin. Ghana beyond aid, a reality?
It's very difficult to assess because much of what we have seen is more of good intentions that we want to go beyond aid. We do not have any concrete strategy with clear implementation timelines on how we want to achieve that. So it's a beautiful thing to look at Ghana beyond aid because in the early part of our independence, we didn't have to depend that much on aid because the colonial masters left us with some positive reserves with very small public debts. By 1961, we had depleted those reserves. We ran into balance of payment problems. So, given Nkrumah's own ideological lineage, was said that Ghana didn't receive much from the traditional aid donors, US, UK, and the rest of them. So, but after that, we started into the mainstream aid flow. But we have received quite a lot over the years. The question is, we have not achieved much with that. So there were issues about aid effectiveness globally that also resulted in the Paris Declaration of Aid Effectiveness in the early part of 2000 and all of that, for which reason Ghana also developed the Ghana aid policy and strategy between 2011 and 2015 and all of that. So if you look at the development literature, you will find that in terms of the trend, aid flows itself has been declining, even as a percentage of GDP. So even if nobody told us that we need to look beyond that, the evidence suggests that that is where we are heading towards because of challenges also where those aids were also coming from, because they also had their own issues and all of that. So this is the reality. But the question is, how is Ghana going to achieve an economy beyond aid? That is the issue.
Well, let's listen to what the president said. He has been explaining what he means by Ghana beyond aid. And he said this at the 5th edition of the African CEO Forum. Let's listen to that and then we'll come back.
We have it within us to create a new paradigm. What is that paradigm? That we can build a Ghana beyond aid. We can build a Ghana which is no longer dependent on handouts and charity.
a number of things about his Ghana beyond, his understanding of Ghana beyond aid. Also, in a speech that he delivered at the G20 Partnership for African Summit in Germany, held this year in June, he also explained further. Let's listen to that as well.
Our dependence on raw materials has in fact increased in the past century. It is this dependence that feeds our dependence on foreign aid. We cannot be doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. We have the resources and means, material and human, with our women and youth in the forefront, to transform the structures of our economies and be part of the international division of labor at the high end of the value chain.
You're welcome back to the studio. We had the president explaining his understanding of the Ghana Beyond Aid that he's been talking about. Prof, the president has articulated a vision. What do you think?
I must say that we have to congratulate the president for thinking very futuristic. And as Professor Bokin has illustrated in his initial introductory statement, it is very clear that we cannot continue to rely on aid. And a good leader must see this. It's not going to be. We cannot continue to rely on aid. It's dwindling, it's becoming unreliable, and the causes of why we should be borrowing, getting official assistance, among others, to sustain us. It's very clear. We import too much, we export too little. The little we export is raw materials. Value addition is denied. If you look at the value chain, we do not employ our people to add value to our resources. Meanwhile, we educate our human resources. How can you be educating your human resources, which is the same as adding value to the human resources, and by default or whatever, we do not add value to our raw materials? We don't add value to the crude we produce in this country. Whatever the difficulties is, we should go out there and solve the problem.
Mr. Dobe, what's your assessment of how we have done as a country with aid? Have we effectively, efficiently used the aid to develop this country?
My assessment would be that it shows that we haven't used it effectively for a number of reasons. Of late, we've said corruption being the number one, but I don't think it's all down to us. I think aid also comes with its own ties, own conditions. So if you take, for instance, when we're forgiving our debt, the HIPIC, we're told to use the funds, not so much to build factories. Okay, we're asked to use the fund for social development, to tackle poverty. Okay, but now we are realizing that the way to tackle poverty is through creating jobs. You know, so often the aid has come with ties. You know, it has come with conditions, and those conditions tie us down in a certain direction. You know, and I also agree with my colleague panelists that we need a leader who would tout a certain vision. Okay, and that's what has happened in all countries. There must be a vision, and that vision becomes the rallying point for all of us.
But as a country, how can we eat our cake and have it? You go for aid, and then it comes with conditions or some guidelines. Can we eat our cake and have it?
Well, that's why the president is saying that we should end it. There must come a time when we should end it. I'm sure it can't be all of a sudden, because we still are dependent, but the vision is we should go beyond aid. Because as long as you are depending on somebody, the person gives you conditionalities. I mean, take what is going on within ECG. Okay, we've gone for some money from the Americans, and based on that, they are telling us how we should dispose of ECG. Okay, so it's as long as you are dependent on somebody, then you are less dependent of what choices you make. And you know the song nowadays is choice. You know, life is about choices, and as long as you can't make choices, then you are not independent.
No country is self-sufficient. You definitely need some support to develop. How do we marry looking at this broad vision of having a country without aid, as well as getting the right support that helps us to position ourselves as a country?
You're right. I mean, no country certainly is self-sufficient, but probably along this line, others have done much better than us. That's the point. So the issue is that it's a kind of a delicate balance, and I do agree with them that, I mean, the president has done well by saying that this is where we are moving towards. But at this stage, it's too early also to mistaking good intentions for accomplishment. So what kind of steps, strategies, policies, programs with clear timelines that says that this is how we are going to exit? You need that to be able to get a buy-in of stakeholders. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult. How did we get in here? It's all about resource gap, funding gap. So if you are unable to maximize the alternative uses of your scarce resources, then you almost become dependent on gifts, handouts, like the president said. Of course, I mean, no Ghanaian is practically happy when every now and then we wake up just to receive. You understand? Whilst others are busy giving and all of that, we are not happy. But look at the problem we have today. If you look at our revenue envelope, it's very difficult to operationalize that statement now because of the level of rigidity in our envelope. Every CD revenue we generate, I mean, just 2 line items take close to 90% of that. Wages and salaries, debt service. So even when you look at the 2017 budget, in terms of certain sectors, agri, health, and the rest of them, the level of support from external tells you that we have a long way to go. Beyond that, even the little aid that we have received over the years, the AU-ISOF, through its own assessment, says that close to 30% of the total aid that came to Africa went back to the same countries they came from through corruption. So effectively, it's just about 70% we are able to put to some level of beyond that. So for a resource-rich country like Ghana, we cannot say that it is possible. But if you look at the level of inefficiency in this country, until we address that, we are not going to make any meaningful way. When you look at, not only in terms of our own corruption, but the external participation in our economy that also fuels illicit financial flows, underground economy, okay? In fact, if you look at how much Ghana loses through illicit financial flow, it's in excess of $1 billion every year. Africa as a whole loses over $50 billion annually through illicit financial flows.
These are huge figures. We'll come back in
and it's more than even whatever we get in terms of aid.
Let me read to you a statement by one writer, Dambiza Moyo, in his book Dead Aid. He said, West Africa has spent $1 trillion. The West has spent $1 trillion on aid to Africa over the past 4 decades, but no nation has ever attained economic development by aid. Prof, this is what we're talking about.
That's right.
But if Prof mentioned that our resource envelope is really tight, there's a lot of rigidity, and we need aid to balance a lot of these things. But if this statement is true, then how do we position ourselves as a country to transit through to having a Ghana beyond aid?
First and foremost, if you are not sick, you don't go to hospital. Maybe you want to go for a review. Yes. But normally, if we are managing our resources properly, we might not be going for the kind of aids we're going. The aid broadly defined includes loans too. So what Godfred said, that how did we get in there, that we have to be borrowing heavily, become very important. And then how do we exit, we synchronize with, so that we do not come back and go into that.
But what's your view about what do you think has brought us to where we are? How did we get here?
Corruption is one. Remember, we had HIPIC, then after that we have the Debt Forgiveness Initiative, MDR, and then we are back. We were far lower than 73% of the GDP in terms of indebtedness.
Almost doubled it.
Yes. So, as I sit here and I see, it's a complex set of situations that is propelling us to be into those difficulties. I started with, there is the need to add value to our resources, create jobs. About 48% of our youth are unemployed. If you look at the per capita income, and they are unemployed, even excluding frictional and disguised unemployment, we are losing heavily. The daily contribution is in idle hands. They are not into the set of activities that will put value to the process. Then when we are adding value, we need also to solve the problems that confront those people who generate the value, the job makers, the job creators. For instance, the electricity difficulties we have, we should have solved it long time. Then the next thing is misplaced values. We think if a government comes and shows we have done this, we have done that, then we have to vote for them. That is not the road to success. The real thing is that, you see, as a country, there are certain things we have to do before other things.
Such as?
Such as, for instance, focusing on education, which we are doing, making sure we place this educated labor in jobs, and then bring high level of sanity into the system. If we're in a rush to show that this is the gigantic edifices we have built and so on and so forth, the danger is we may overborrow, and then we are confronted with servicing the debt, even as we get more aid. So what happens is this: the repayment of those debts we have accumulated tend to take a big chunk of our revenue, which is also very scarce. Big portion is going to wages and salaries, the productivity which does not match what goes in terms of financial appropriation. And then at the same time, we have all these people incurring huge debts we are going to pay from the revenue we have. So we take a big chunk. So it's like you are rushing too fast to rush slow. All the monies we are using, we are now refinancing our deficit, we are paying loans, we have to amortize the debt, and so on and so forth. To the extent, if that trajectory continues, a time will come, the revenue we'll use it to pay for the loans we have incurred. So sanity in the system, so that we make do with what we have. Prioritize what we got to do first before the next set of activities. You can't accomplish all programs in a day. You have to programatize them so that they evolve, and that self-sustaining set of activities will set into the program. But we are in a rush. Look at some of the things we build and we've loaned. We forget that you have to service. So when we clean the system, we sanitize, we reduce corruption, We don't go into long gestation projects with short finances we get from here and there.
Prof, it is very important that you talk about loan and how we use the loan. Mr. Dube, are we prioritizing as a country? Because once you go for a loan or a facility, you need to prioritize to make sure that you can maximize the use. Or are we prioritizing as a country?
Like I said, I think some of these loans comes with conditionalities. Okay, and I gave the HIPIC one as a classic example. I think when we're forgiving our debt, we should have been given a free hand to decide whether we're going to use for productive ends or for social ends. Okay, we were told we have to use it to address poverty, which meant basically building HIPIC toilets and HIPIC schools. Okay.
Is that addressing poverty?
Well, that was some of the things we did with the money. So yes, some of it is our fault. Okay, but then I also think that it's not true that aid has not helped other countries recover. And the classic example is the Marshall Plan. Okay, the Marshall Plan post-World War was meant to help Western European countries devastated by war. And I went to Wikipedia. I mean, this was American initiative. And they gave at the time, it was $13 billion. But I mean, today's equivalent to 130 billion, okay? And within 4 years, not 60 years, within 4 years, Western Europe was back on its feet. And why? Because in addition to the loan, it says the goals of the United States were to rebuild war-devastated regions, remove trade barriers, modernize industry, make Europe prosperous once more, and prevent the spread of communism. The Marshall Plan required a lessening of interstate barriers, a dropping of many regulations, and encouraged an increase in productivity, labor union membership, as well as the adoption of modern business procedures. Our aid does not come with that kind of package. On one hand, you are giving the money.
Do we blame the donors? Or we should blame ourselves?
It's an unfair international order, economic order, where, I mean, now people are saying, look, the best way out of poverty is trade, not aid. You know, we've known this all along, but there have been trade barriers. When others are subsidizing their farmers, they say you shouldn't subsidize your farmer. Okay? When others are subsidizing education, they tell you, I mean, you go to the UK, children are being educated all the way to secondary school level, free. Okay, at one point, I think 10 years ago, even up to university. It was only recently they introduced loans and so on. But then they tell you, no, you must charge fees because you are coming for a loan from us. So for me, and the West is also paying for it. Okay, because as long as we stay in poverty, our children are unemployed. They head for the Europe. Okay, and now because they are confronted with that, they are now trying to take measures here so that our people can stay here. But then it's a complex set of issues, and I mean the international there needs to be a fairer international system to make it work. Like for instance, we can't have a situation where China says, okay, we are coming to build a national theater, and they come with their own labor, or build stadium and come with their own labor. What happens to our labor here? So another part is also we being able to be a bit more assertive. Okay, when our people go for negotiations, sometimes you wonder, what is it? You know, what do they go and discuss there? You know, why do they come with such terrible packages? How can somebody come and mine our gold? Okay, and all we get as a nation is some 30, if we add all of it, is 30%. And the 70% goes to a company with shareholders. You know, so I think some of it is our fault, but some of it is also the international economic order. It's not favoring us. And those who are giving aid, I say that the aid is not coming with sincerity. The aid is more for political advantage.
But we've used aid to do some fine things in this country. Is it all negative?
I wouldn't say it's all negative. But the fact is, we are where we are. Okay, because we've depended too much on aid. Okay.
We have civil society organizations heavily depending on aid, public health, governance issues,
yes.
and organizations like yours depend on aid to do activities.
That is...
So we can't say it's all wrong.
No, it's not all wrong. That's why I give an example of Marshall Plan, that it needs to be more comprehensive.
But even here in Ghana, we have achieved some modest gains.
We have achieved some modest gains, but the fact is that we are still where we are. We are still, all the civil society organizations who are involved, are involved with the idea that we will one day go beyond aid. And to do that, we need to put our institutions in place. So there's the political dimension. Okay, make our institutions work. And that's why we find the CDD and the Imani and so on, and CIMAC, Citizen Movement Against Corruption, fighting that. We need to do some internal re-engineering. Okay, and we can't sit back and just wish it away that one day we'll go beyond aid. We need to do that, and we need to put exert pressure on the political leadership to do the right thing. It's all towards that hope that one day we wouldn't be depending on others, because it drops your dignity. Because it comes to a point where somebody says, well, I'm feeding you.
But Prof, for a civil society organization like yours and the CDDs and all those who are doing public health, if you are getting funding from government, we know civil society exerts a lot of pressure and advocates and push governments. Now, if government is funding you, how do we position that within the example that you're giving?
If you go to other countries, and it happens in even Europe, even aid, when it's brought here, sometimes the donor countries want their civil society organizations to implement it. They come as consultants, they come in all kinds of forms. So why can't our government say, look, there are certain departments which are basically now defunct. Their roles are being taken over by NGOs. So why can't government allocate money to those organizations so that they can do it properly? Okay.
Well, we'll come to you. We know countries are in existence to protect themselves. And are we protecting this nation called Ghana enough? Because Mr. Dobe talked about going to negotiations, and sometimes some of the things we negotiate for and all that. Shouldn't we be more aggressive in protecting our interests?
Yeah, I'm sure we could have done better along those lines. And I think that our idea of aid should not be an end in itself. It should be seen as a means to an end. The countries that developed with aid saw it to be a means, a stepping stone, and not an end in itself. So if we had a clear strategy that says that, so if you had a strategy that you want to get here, the next question is the funding modalities. Some may come in terms of aid, others may come in terms of this. How they complement each other, how you juggle them within that space is more important. And for me, that is where I will look at it from. Aid in our part of the world, and I'm sure the West, the donors themselves, have also acknowledged that it hasn't been that effective as compared to other countries that he cited. And the level of unpredictability and the conditionalities that are also subject to their own interpretation as such that in terms of aligning it to our developmental path hasn't been that clear and managed well over the years. I wouldn't blame them. The best helping hand you can find any time is at the end of your own arm. We cannot outsource that to development partners or donor partners, that we are in this because you didn't do this or that. If you look at this country, many of the even research, impactful research is driven largely by donor supports, and it comes with an agenda. So when you look at maybe the budget of, let's say, Noguchi Center for Medical Research, University of Ghana, or many of those, you will find that, more than 50% of their budget is from outside. And of course, they have a certain idea of what disease or what should be investigated, which may not be entirely in line with how we see things. But the question is, if that is meant to solve a certain problem, the later that we are also able to generate, how do we use it to complement that? For me, that is more important, because we cannot sleep and wake up and expect that the West will come and develop our country for us. That won't happen.
Prof, isn't that the more reason why as a country we should know what our priorities are? Have we prioritized? Do we know what the critical areas are? For instance, let's talk about public health. Do we know what our critical public health needs are, such that when a donor is coming, they feed into that national agenda, rather than they come and they say we are interested in TB, we are interested in malaria, or we are interested in something else. Have we as a country protected our own interest in those fronts?
Precisely. Normally that is what we say, that is a section B, and that is where all the marks are. If you fail to deliver along those lines.
What's your assessment of how we've done?
We haven't done quite well. If you look at our health system, the level of foreign intervention, even in the design, implementation, is very huge. It's very huge. Without them, I'm not too sure where we would have been. So that's the issue. I'm not too sure whether Ghana has at any point in time seriously sat down and thought of actually where we want to get to and how we want to get there and the timelines and whether we will be able to keep to that. For me, that is more important because, look, after we went through HIPIC and completed that in 2004 and finished the Multilateral Debt Relief Initiative in 2006, our debt to GDP ratio came to less than 40%. In other words, we had borrowing space, so we could inject growth through external debt financing by scaling up our investment infrastructure. We started borrowing. But did we explore efficiency? No. Over the years, you will never go to any classroom today, basic economics, and find people telling students that you have more resources. Resources are limited everywhere, whether in US, Europe, or Ghana. But the beautiful thing about that statement is that those scarce resources have alternative uses. To what extent do we maximize the alternative uses of our scarce resources, prioritizing and maximizing the efficiency in all of that? Because if you invest in infrastructure and you don't explore efficiency, it will have implications for productivity growth. This has been our problem over the years. The World Bank, the IMF, the International Development Associations have documented that the level of inefficiency in public investments in Africa, developing countries, including Ghana, is more than 30%. That is unacceptable. Look, if you can spend, I'm not doing politics here, forgive me, if we can spend more than $600,000 just to wall your embassy, okay, and beyond, that's just one example. And now, look, just pick the auditor's reports, the last 10 years, okay? Just take a good meal and go through them.
And then if we can recover all those,
you'll be amazed
what we can do with it.
You can look at all of this and say that, look, how much is the aid we are getting? It's so small.
And how much is the leakage?
I mean, it's so small.
We'll go for a break. When we come back, we'll look at how we can plug the revenue leakages and how that can gradually get us to a Ghana beyond aid. We'll be back shortly after this break.